Good evening and welcome to the Hub for Ministry and Community Connect. Tonight, we will be discussing mental health, but the Hub, we discuss a lot of things. We don't just discuss mental health, we discuss finances, we discuss community, we discuss education, politics. So this is definitely a space. If you want to hear just current, what's going on, what's being talked about, please come and join us every first Friday of the month, 7:00 p.m. Meet us here, the Hub House of God Worship Center. I'm your host, Shamira Webb, and I have with me tonight, Trisha Pelk. Trisha is a licensed professional counselor, and I'm going to give her some time to introduce herself. But Trish has been doing this for over 10 years, and she's just going to come on tonight, and we're going to dialogue about mental health, about managing it, and even what it looks like in this pandemic. So Trish, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Trisha Pelk, and like Shamira said, I'm a licensed professional counselor, presently in Pennsylvania, and I am a trauma therapist, and I also work with individuals, couples, teenagers, and adults, helping them to survive and thrive.
Awesome. So you work with a lot of different people right now, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so Trish, you know that there's the pandemic, of course, everybody knows, right? And I know that in your field, it might look different right now. Can you just start us by telling us what does it look like now from a mental health professional perspective? What does the field look like? Is it an increase in need or more people having challenges? Like, what does it look like right now?
Yes, when the pandemic happened last year, there was a rather large influx of mental health clients, people needing more mental health. And in the spring, you kind of see influxes anyways, usually spring around the end of summer and around Christmas time, naturally. So when this happened, it was kind of around that time when we would have seen an influx. But yes, like a vast majority of people who had even never had mental health started, contacting people. And it's on video, it's on phone, it's on Zoom, it's on professional therapy websites. So it did change a lot of things, psychiatry too. So.
So the pandemic, so you said that, so it sounds like you said that mental health is seasonal. So it literally increases in the spring?
It will increase in the spring, usually with kids and teenagers, definitely, but also with people, kind of as they're coming out of that seasonal affective and they're trying to get, back into the good mood, back into feeling normal and happy again. But also just because, there will be also an increase in suicides in the spring as well. As well as, around holidays, but you see actually a little bit more when the weather starts to shape up. You also see more because, community violence also kind of amps up once spring kind of hits, summer kind of hits, the days are getting warmer and lighter. So you have those peaks throughout the year.
Well, I didn't know it was attributed to such things. I can definitely see now looking back in retrospect, seasons changing. But Trish, if you would, I think this last year has been challenging, not just in terms of the pandemic, but even this social space has been really, really, really different. So I think when you consider where people are mentally, there have been a lot of things that happened in 2020 where people had no control over some things that people did have control over. I think we can say that COVID is something that nobody had control over. So a lot of things that have happened in this last year, people didn't have control over it. So how do you suggest, or what's your recommendation as it relates to managing our mental health? I know you and I have talked before and you have these amazing tips. I hope that you dive into those tonight. Those were amazing. Those were dead on. But I do want you to kind of speak to the space we're in and how, just in such a time where everything's unpredictable, you have to cover up half your face to go out. Social isn't social. Like, let's start there.
Well, if you think of the ramifications of the pandemic, you have people who were losing their jobs. You have people who, because of medical problems, because of their family members, because, I have clients who haven't seen their elderly parents in a year, or 6 months, or if they did, they saw them from outside of, that person's home. So people are disconnected literally from their primary family. You have people who they lost the support for single moms, single dads, grandparents who are raising kids. And when we can't control things, it causes us to feel more stressed, and it causes us to worry about maybe things that we wouldn't spend as much time worrying about. So then top on that, all of the other things that were happening over the summer with all of the social justices, violence, all of those
Yeah.
things came within about a 1 to 2 month time, well, about a 2 to 3 month time frame, and it was one after another after another after another, and that it overwhelms people.
The latter part of that, Trish, I think is huge. I don't think, as we've transitioned into 2021, there hasn't been a lot of conversation, if you will, on a lot of the social injustices that were coupled, if you will, with a pandemic. So you have partner in health and all of the racial issues, like they were like this, and people were having
Yes.
to deal with the combination of both of them. And that's a lot.
Yes, it is.
Then you also mentioned
And
the support piece, like not having the support of family and friends. And I mean, I think that's kind of big too.
yes, and when you think about it, as humans, we will mirror each other's emotions. So if you think about laughter, a yawn, it's contagious. Like you can't not yawn when someone yawns. You can't not laugh without, when someone is laughing, without some serious effort for that one. So if you think about it, if we're like this, we can't see anything. We don't know if people are safe. We don't know if we can't see their, if they're smiling, if they're frowning. So we look to emotionally regulate ourselves with the person we're having a conversation with. So that becomes very difficult when you can only see like this far up. So
Wow.
people who are already stressed out and anxious, or who've been traumatized, that's very difficult for them because they don't have that social interaction fully to see the facial features to gauge, like, is this going to be a safe, thing for me to do? And safety
That is so
is
interesting.
relative to the individual.
Well, safety in this time, Trish, is extremely relative because we're
Mm-hmm.
staying distant so that we won't get sick. So that's
Yes.
extremely relative. But based on what you just said, so from the face down, we mirror emotion, and the lack of seeing emotion creates more of a social distance. You think that's already included with the physical distance. So because I can't see your face, I don't know what your eyes are really saying.
Right, because if you think about it, like, I wear glasses, so my mask usually has to come up underneath my glasses, so that it will keep that mask down tight, so that they fog up all the time, but with my prescription sunglasses, like, they don't fog up because it's a tighter fit on my nose. But if you think about it, with toddlers and with little kids learning to speak, they could, like, if you had a speech therapist coming, or if it's on Zoom, like, they can't see their mouth to make the shape. Babies can't see people when they're interacting with them to know if they're safe or not. So we have this thing that our body does called neuroception, and it's a very quick, and it's very unconscious and subconscious, that we are constantly scanning people, their posture, their facial expressions, their body language for danger. It's automatic. It's automatic. It's automatic. So when we can't see that, it makes it uncomfortable for people. It makes them, feel a little more hypervigilant. Like, I don't know how to gauge this person. I don't know how to determine, how this interaction may go.
Trish, if I may, so this last
Yes.
part, is that learned or is that innate? The fact that we scan
That,
people.
the neuroception is, everyone has it. It's biological.
Got it. So we all do the same thing unconsciously.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. So I want you to kind of get into some tips on how we can manage our mental health, just not in this pandemic, but in general. Like, how can we manage being healthy mentally?
Well, I think, a lot of people in this situation, and not necessarily, well, like you said, like, not necessarily in this situation, but if you think about it, when we're struggling, we don't always ask for help. So the first thing is reach out to your support system if you have one. Reach out and find out from your doctor, or, people that from work, or people in your community. How can I get help? I'm struggling with this. So the first thing is, one, admitting that I can't do this all by myself. And that can be very hard for people, because we don't want to appear weak, and we don't want to feel like we don't have our life handled in this perfect little or a set of to-do list, kind of thing. If we ask for help, people are going to look at us like, why don't you have your home in line? Or why don't you have yourself in line? But we do ourselves an injustice when we struggle and suffer all by ourselves. So the first step would be to get help in some way, shape, or form, or just to let someone else know, so if some of that stuff comes out, so it's not festering. Even if you just talk to your girlfriend or one of your buddies, or your mom or your grandma, anybody, and people, even when we're grocery shopping, if we're in line, we chit chat with somebody, we will talk to the cashier, or we'll talk to, just someone we see. We might even see someone we know. You know what I mean? So that little bit of social engagement, of that interaction with someone, is very important. And with the pandemic, with, that's kind of like tightened up.
Okay.
We're not getting that. You know what I mean? Second, would be learn that there are things that you can control and things that you have no control over. And if you can't control it, don't worry about it. Save that for, something that, you can journal about, something that you can get those thoughts out. But we spend so much time worrying about things that we can't do anything about, because in some way, shape, or form, it affects us, whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally. Nobody likes to feel powerless. Nobody likes to feel helpless. No one wants to feel hopeless.
Trish, if I may stop you right there, would you say that there's a relationship between anxiety and control?
Oh, there's definitely a relationship between anxiety and control. Anxiety is all about fearing the uncertainty and not understanding the uncertainty. So people do not want to, they don't want to kind of branch out because they don't know if the reaction is going to be positive or not.
Wow. And anxiety can be really consuming. Like, anxiety is almost like a handicap. Because if you can't control something, the fear that's associated with it will literally consume you and stop you. Wow. Okay, that's good. Okay, you can finish. I'm sorry. I just have a few questions as you go.
Yeah. And, with going with that, the sense of anxiety, sorry, my son fell, so he's kind of crying out there. With the sense of anxiety and the lack of control, if you think about it, I've had this discussion with a few people this week who are very highly anxious. People will stay with, quote unquote, the devil they know than the devil they don't. So even if you know that something is really bad or something is really stressful and you're toxic, or you have to get, you need to get it out of your life. People who have been in a chronic situation of stress, whether at their job, whether at school, whatever the case may be, the unknown of, well, what could be different, and even if it's better and actually a good thing of getting out of that situation, they don't know what to expect. So they will stay in the crap, the turmoil that they know, because they can expect what's going to happen, compared to, if I get rid of this or dissolve this, I don't know what's going to come. Which, so if you think about it, it's disheartening.
Naturally. So what I hear you saying is that some people are so anxious, are dealing with anxiety on such a heavy level, or load, if you will, that they will stay in an uncomfortable, toxic, unhealthy environment, situation, relationship, whatever that looks like, as opposed to trying something new, because at least they know what the unhealthy stuff looks like.
Yes, that's very correct.
Wow. Trish, that's huge. So let's just, and
Yes.
we're in this anxiety piece. So if we can, as a licensed professional counselor, what do you give somebody, if I was this person, if I was that person that we're discussing, and I had this really, really bad anxiety, and it was what we just discussed, it keeps me in unhealthy cycles, it keeps me in toxic relationships, friendships, situationships. What do you say to me?
Well, part of that is, one, would you recognize that you're choosing that? You know what I mean? Like, does the person recognize that, like, hey, just because I don't know what that means doesn't mean that I can't get through it, because they don't see that they have persevered and suffered through and are still functioning, you know what I mean, in this bad situation, that they could actually do it function and get out of it, but they don't believe in themselves. So that's where like anxiety and depression, they're best
Mm-hmm.
friends. So if most
Wow.
people, a large percentage of anxious people will eventually end up depressed because they will start coupling together. Because if you have panic attacks, you can't leave your house because you're starting to have agoraphobic like behaviors. You become depressed because you become isolated. You become depressed because you start telling your friends, no, I can't go do that. No, I'm not really feeling too good. And then your friends are like, they stop calling you, they stop asking you. And then you feel like, wow, like I'm all alone, I'm isolated, like I don't have anyone. But so it's a vicious circle. And part of that is the cognitive piece of that is recognizing that it's anxiety and that it's the fear of the unknown, and that people also with that fear of the unknown is they fear change because they can't predict change.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So you would just want to know if I recognized that I did that.
Yeah, like, and recognizing that, and then we would do, you would want, if it's just anxiety and not trauma related of any way, shape, or form, like cognitive behavioral therapy is a great way to kind of help with that. If it's obsessive compulsive disorder and there's no trauma associated with it, you could do cognitive behavioral or CBT with ERP.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a specialized treatment for like OCD. So there, with anxiety, you have your cognitions, which are your thoughts, you have your behaviors, and you have your emotions. So they loop together, and so it teaches people how to break that pattern of, once they get that anxious thought, how to break it so that then their anxiety and behaviors don't fuel each other. Or if you have the anxious feeling and then you have the thought and the behavior, they're interchangeable. And obviously,
Wow.
like relaxation skills, giving people education on a really simple thing to do is learn how to diaphragm breathe. And if you can breathe through a stressful event, you can get through that event.
Trish, what does that look like? Diaphragm breathing. Is that a technique? Is that just, it's just breathing?
Right. So when we're not thinking about breathing, or we're not thinking about something that would change our breathing pattern, we automatically, unconsciously breathe that way. So, that's that nice, you see singers do it, you see yoga people do it, you see athletes do it. They are diaphragm breathing, calmly, and they're collecting their thoughts. So your lungs, your diaphragm is where the diaphragm breath actually comes from, but your breathing system and your heart are connected. And if you slow down your breathing in a stressful situation, your heart rate slows down. And then
Mm-hmm.
both of those things send to your brain that, hey, like I'm okay, like I can get through this. Because initially the brain sent the signal to your body that says something is stressful, something's dangerous, I don't feel comfortable, like I'm not safe, like there's a perception of something bad is going to happen. So it kicks in that breathe faster, heart rate goes faster, so we can move faster, either the fight or flight. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Wow. So everybody in the audience, Trish just gave us some good information on anxiety. And I think that's really important because I think the pandemic has increased anxiety for a lot of people. Like increased anxiety. Oh my God, I don't want to get COVID. I don't want to go to the grocery store. I don't want to go anywhere because I don't want to get COVID. So I think anxiety has increased all the way around. But Trish, if you will, just go back into the steps that you were giving us. The last one was learn that there are things that you can control and that you can't.
Correct. So understanding that is very helpful. Learning that if you've already been facing difficult things, you can face the next difficult thing. But if you learn to breathe through it, you ask for help, you have your support system, it makes it a whole lot easier. You know what I mean? And for that, each person, it's going to be different for each person. Some people don't have that support. So that's when you kind of reach out. There's online support groups, and there's been online support groups since Facebook, since, Twitter, all of those things. There's community support groups. So where I live at, we have NAMI and we have a mental health association,
Mm-hmm.
and they do free stuff for kids, free stuff for adults, even specialized groups like for PTSD or for like borderline personality or for bipolar. anxiety, but also just free community things that you just walk in and say, I'm here for the 6 o'clock group tonight on anxiety, and you join. You know what I mean? And
So you're just join a community that reflects your challenge or what you need help with. Just join an online community. That's good.
yeah, I mean, and you want to make sure like that it's reputable if you're going to do an online one, and make sure that it's not something that is going to be inappropriate or anything like that, obviously. But like even AA, NA, SAGA, all of the anonymous self-help groups, they even switched to everything online, to telephone, to Zoom, so that people had that support still.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. We also have like a star or pound 211 here that's done by our where you can call in and say, hey, like I'm having trouble. I lost my job. I'm having trouble. I don't know how to apply for assistance. They can tell you like, hey, go to this website. Hey, call this phone number. Or, we had a fire and I'm looking for clothes for my kids. I don't know where I can get some. You know what I mean? Like we have in all the communities around the country, like have things like that. It's just people don't know how to look for it or how to search for it.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Trish, that's good. So what about, I've heard you speak on toxicity before, and toxic
Yes.
relationships and toxic friendships. Can you go into that space?
Yes. So with toxic relationships, whether it's family, and intimate, work, social, whatever it is, those relationships don't cause happiness. Those relationships bring drama. It brings sometimes physical violence, emotional violence, drugs and alcohol. It brings things into those relationships that were not supposed to be there. So sometimes it's very hard to walk away from a toxic relationship, because even if we've been in it for so long, sometimes it takes an event to have us like startle and step back and say like, wow, I don't want this anymore. This isn't good for me. And when we love the other person or care about them, or we would have to see them, say it's like even with your mom or with a sibling, that's very hard to kind of take that step to say, you know what, I don't want this in my life anymore. I can't do this to myself, to my kids, whatever the situation is. And so setting boundaries for those things can be very difficult, because the anxiety and fear comes into where we don't want to hurt the other person, and we don't want to also, we don't want to feel like if it's a marriage, or like say you're in a partnership or a long-term relationship, 10, 15 years, or even 5, we don't want to feel like we failed in whatever that relationship was. And so it can be very hard to say no to someone that you've always said yes to, or you just were silent and did it anyways because you couldn't say no.
And one of your lines I've heard you say is that no is a sentence.
No is what?
A sentence. No is a complete sentence.
Yes. So if, just like consent for, sexual activity, no means no, if you say yes, but under force or coercion, it's a no. If you can't say, I can't think, I'm just drew mind blank, but when someone says no, it means no. You don't go past the line. It's like, stop, don't go collect $200. Don't go around a Monopoly board again. I said no. You know what I mean? So saying no can be as difficult as, oh, honey, I spent all my money and I need to borrow like $200 because they're going to shut my gas bill off. Well, Mom, what'd you do with your money? Well, I went to the casino, and you already know what they did with their money before you asked. You know what I mean? But you're just hoping maybe it wasn't that. And you get the guilt trip sometimes, and then you say yes, but it wasn't really a yes because you couldn't clearly with without guilt, without anxiety, without negative emotion, say yes. It's kind of like you're being backed into the corner. So you're just, okay. You know what I mean? But you wanted to say no. Does that make sense?
If I can ask you this first. Yes, it makes a lot of sense. So what is there anything that happens to your psyche or your emotions when you have a pattern of saying yes when you mean no?
Yeah. So people in trauma situations or in high conflict situations will say yes and appease somebody to avoid that conflict, to avoid that potential for having to fight or flight or shut down and freeze. So we'll just, okay. Even on the inside, like our body is screaming like, no, 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 like, why are you doing this? But because we don't want the negative outcome, sure. Yeah, I can do that for you. You know what I mean? So you appease somebody to avoid whatever that negative or that potentially aggressive, violent situation may be, even though the thing you might be saying yes to is bad.
And so we can even circle that back to anxiety, because it's what I hear is an external situation can create so much internal conflict. Like your whole body is saying no, your heart, your soul, everything in you is saying no, but your mouth is saying yes.
Yep. So the cognitive part up here, the neocortex system is like, but the person might be sitting back like this and their body might start tensing up. So when I ask someone, hey, are you ready to process your being fired from work? And the person's like, yeah, like that would be a good idea. We've been talking about it, but they're getting farther back away from me. Or, you can see that tension, or you see that breath hitch and it switches into their chest. They're not saying yes. They're doing, and on the inside, they're like, are you crazy? Like, what are you doing? Like, say no, you're not ready for that.
Wow.
So you can see it in their face or body while their lips are saying,
So let me ask you this. Is that learned?
Is it learned? Yeah, your brain's primary role is survival. It goes back to caveman days. You have to survive, whether it's from the tiger, whether it's from the storm, whether it's from abuse, whether it's from a crappy boss, whether it's from like, I don't have any food, what am I going to do? You do what you have to do to survive. And sometimes that's not a good thing. That's not something that you actually want to do, but it's something that you feel pressured or like you have to do it because you have to do this other thing. So first and foremost, the brain will go into survival mode. Now there's extremes to that. It's a continuum.
Yeah, I know, with all due respect. So this is some good stuff. So if you want to, you can just get right back into your tips.
Yeah. So any coping skill can be something that you enjoy doing, whether that is reading, whether that's dancing, music, taking a bubble bath, lighting candles and doing yoga. It doesn't have to be something that you have to pay money to do. There are these things that you already enjoy. It's just that sometimes you might need to add something to it. You know what I mean? Sometimes listening to music will help people get their mind off of stuff. But then sometimes if the worry or the stress or the situation is too much, then you have to, either incorporate another coping skill or relaxation skill and, do some of those things together. Excuse me. Keeps falling out of my ear. But exercise is very helpful. Getting a good night's sleep is very helpful. We tend to be more anxious, more irritable, more apt to, have that short fuse if we're an anxious or angry person when we have lack of sleep. If we skip, meals, if you didn't eat breakfast and you didn't eat lunch, by the time 6 o'clock comes around, you're probably going to be irritable when all you want to do is home and eat, and then someone wants your attention, right? Or you feel like I have to do 5 other things before I can kick my shoes off and relax and take a breath. So with stress and anxiety, also balancing your time is very good, because if you give and you give and you give and you give and you give, you give to your kids, you give to your parents, you give to the people at work, you give to, anything else you're involved in, what do you have left? What do you have left to take care of you so that you can continue to, wear all these hats that we all wear, So some people think like, well, it's selfish if I take time to do something for myself if I have kids. Well, if you're going to come home and be angry and irritable with your kids because you didn't take, say, that extra half an hour, to kind of do whatever it is you needed to do or whatever, what good are you doing them if you just came home and yelled at them because they were excited to see you,
So Trish,
or yes.
in this environment, a lot of parents and kids are in the same space all day though. So
Yes,
considering this virtual school, considering that everybody's working remotely or teleworking, that's kind of like the norm. It's not as normal. It's not an anomaly no more to have kids at home at school and the parents in the other room working. So with a situation that's presented as we are in this pandemic, how do you what's the workaround? If you don't have a drive from work or you don't have anything else, what's a workaround from that?
Well, part of it is that's difficult because every situation, every individual has something else going on. Like if you have 2 floors to your home, it'd be kind of nice, you know what I mean? Because you could say, all right, kids, mom's going to go upstairs. I gotta handle this business call. I got a snack out for you. Here's a game, just give me 10, 15 minutes. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's thinking outside of the box, but we get so exhausted because we became a teacher. We're still working if we could, we can't go anywhere. We can't take the kids to a park. I mean, the parks in the city I live in, you're not allowed to play in them still.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the kids don't have an outlet. So it was kind of nice, like in the beginning of all of this, you couldn't. Hold on one second.
Audience, if you have any questions that you would like me to ask for Trish, or just any questions that you have as it relates to your own mental health, please just put them in the comments. I will definitely ask. Mental health is important for all of us, and it's good to get counseling. It's good to figure out what triggers you. It's good to figure out and try to understand what's wrong with you. Sometimes we go through mood swings. Sometimes we're stressed and we don't even realize we're stressed. Sometimes we're under a lot of pressure. So it's definitely important that we seek professional counseling, that we seek people who are credentialed when it comes to some of this stuff as it relates to our mental health. It's also important to understand that sometimes you are the problem. I think it's easy to look externally when we're trying to figure out mental health and we want to just say, well, this situation did this or that person or this person. But sometimes it's important to come back in our own mental spaces and see where we're at. And, are we even looking at everything appropriately or correctly? So Trish is back. I'm going to let her finish what she was asking. But again, if you have any questions that you want me to ask Trish, please put them in the comments on Facebook. I promise you I'm getting them, and I will make sure she gets an opportunity to answer them if we have enough time.
So sorry about that. So that was like a kind of a perfect example of, trying to do, I mean, obviously I'm not working right now. I'm doing this because Shamira is a good friend, but when you have a kid having a meltdown and you're like doing this and you're doing that, like, and you get distracted. Sometimes it's that, you take that deep breath. And if you think like, if you're frustrated, if your kid's like, mom, or dad, or grandma, whatever, whoever, I need this. In their mind, they need it right now. You know what I mean? In our mind, we're like, okay, but that can wait for another half an hour. Like you have 35,000 other things in this house you could do. You know what I mean? But in their mind, like, I need this now. I need you for me now, but so if you take a step back and you just really take a few deep breaths and say, okay, before you open your mouth to interact, like, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I going to say or do? And is it going to make that good or bad? So if I would have freaked out on my son and was like, okay, like, you just need to go do this, go do that, and I got mad and angry, you know what I mean? He would have escalated, like crying and freaking out. And, the dog treats her with remote control because, the puppy's crazy, you know what I mean? So, but I just went out there and said, look, I can turn it off. Look, I can turn it back on, just watch whatever it clicked on. I was like, watch that for right now. And he was like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? But just like with us, we can get that initial like flood of emotion or flood of distress to where we don't think straight, you know? So take that step back, take some deep breaths, and go outside and get a breath of fresh air. And sometimes you have to tell your kid, hey, mom or dad or whoever you are, I need a 5-minute timeout. Let's, you know, give mom the 5 minutes, you know, go get a drink of water. I'm going to get a drink of water. Like water is actually like nice to just get a cold drink of water to just kind of refresh that system.
That's good, because I know, you know, the immediate attention, and it can be something that in my mind's eye can wait till like tomorrow. But I know with my girls, it's almost like now, now, now. And it's just like, yep, no, that's not now. And you know, you just gotta literally find a way to casually transition the conversation and help them to understand, okay, really, I cannot do that right now, but I promise you when I can, I will. And you know, when you're talking to a 6 and 8 year old, in my case, everything to your point is now. Like they don't understand the concept of time. And there are adults who operate in that same space. There are adults who operate in the same space of, it does not matter what you're doing, I don't care how long you've been doing it, what I need is more important. And I think that almost comes off like entitlement, if you will, that I can stop what you're doing, you stop, it's my turn. That's almost a sense of entitlement. I'm not sure if you would agree, but in my mind's eye, when someone can make what you're doing or devalue what you're doing to make what they're doing more important, I think that's a bit entitlement. But a question did come into the comments I want to ask you. How do you identify triggers with those who deal with anxiety? How do you identify triggers with those who deal with anxiety?
So you'll see you know, you obviously we can't see the gears twisting in someone's head, but you can see them. They might pick their nails. They might be nail biters. They might start fidgeting. Like I'm a fidgeter when I'm anxious or stressed out. So you might see someone fidgeting. You might see someone tapping their pencil, tapping their leg. Like my husband will shake the entire house. Well, he used to, would shake the entire house. So like the ceiling fans, like going, you know, I'm thinking it's going to fall off the ceiling. You know, he would do it when we would drive home from Virginia to Pennsylvania for a family event. I'm just like, you're gonna make me car sick. Like you gotta stop while driving. You know what I mean? So you'll see like, you know, like you could see that body posture like start to tense, you know, lean back in a chair, or you see the jaw tighten, you see the shoulders tighten, you'll see physical symptoms. If you're good at detecting those things, you can catch with their eyes, or you can catch sometimes that hitch of a breath, and you can see then their shoulders will move if they start breathing. You know what I mean? They will also, some like kids and some adults, when they're really stressed, like they'll tell you the same thing like 5 different ways over and over and over again, because they're thinking about it so fast in their head that they'll stumble through their words sometimes. Or, you know, you might think like, you just told me that like five times, you know, and then you go to interrupt them and say, hey, yeah, I understand. Wow. And they'll get upset about it. So depending on the type of anxiety, you know, could depend on the type of kind of things that you would see that would let you know that they're experiencing some form of distress.
So Trish,
trigger to anxiety could be anything, literally anything.
So what I hear you saying is that redundancy in nature can be linked to anxiety.
At times, depending on the person. Some people, like if you remember Ryan at work, just like to talk and talk and talk in circles. And I don't know if that was related to anxiety or just, you know, just didn't have a way to express it succinctly.
I would have never coupled that. Like, I mean, this is my first time hearing it. Like, I would have never coupled that. So I'm doing an evaluation of my repetitive nature. And at times I can repeat something in context and I rearrange my words and it sounds different, but it means the same thing. And now that I do a personal reflection, it makes me wonder if I'm trying to get an immediate answer, one, to something you just mentioned, or if I'm trying to control something that it's not moving as quickly as I think. So I think if there is a link, if there is a correlation, if you will, between redundancy in speech and anxiety, I think that's so interesting. I think it can be proven. It's probably founded. So I just find it interesting. Wow.
Well, if with OCD, they will repeat things, like especially like kids who have like autism, like my son has Asperger's. So if I wouldn't have attended to whatever he needed, like he would have said the same thing. It would have looped and looped and looped and looped and looped. And it would have came out like in a few different ways, but it's a track. You know what I mean? That just keeps going. Now, maybe someone who has more physical type of OCD, you know, more of the compulsions, because people think that everyone who has OCD is like the guy from Monk, you know what I mean? From back in the day, like germaphobe, or like Howie Mandel, germaphobe, you know what I mean?
Right.
Can't touch anything, you know, don't come in my house and move everything. If you move something like a quarter of a fraction of an inch, like they're going to notice it. Not everyone has that. Some people's OCD, like you don't necessarily see it because it's not like, oh, you have to have everything perfect, or, oh, you have to have, you know, something clean, or everything has to be blue, or everything has to be done in an even number, or like, you know, counts of fours, you know what I mean? So sometimes it's all up here, and it's the way that they will communicate in their thought pattern. And then you're just like, what, you know, why does that bother you? But in their mind, they've already played it over and over and over and over and over again.
Wow.
You know, it's
And to
like
your
with a
initial
kid,
point.
yeah, so a kid will repeat the same thing over and over and over again when they're anxious. Like, well, Mom, why can't I have that? Mom, why can't I go to Billy's? Mom, come on, I already did my homework. Mom, come on, please. And, you know, they're getting worked up and they're getting anxious because they know you, one, you probably already said no, or two, you're going to say no because of maybe they're still grounded or something. But, you know, then they will say, come on, Mom, please. Like, Mom, please. Like, Mom, please. It's kind of like poke, 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 poke. And then, of course, they're getting more upset. And if we aren't aware of where we're at emotionally, we're going to start getting irritated, and then we're going to, and that's how, you know, that's how we kind of sometimes like set our own kids off too, because we're not aware. Like, I really shouldn't have discussed that if I just had a bad meeting at work. And I'm like thinking like, oh my God, like, did I just really put my foot in my mouth, and am I going to get in trouble? You know what I mean? And then your kid asks for a popsicle. It's 100 degrees in Hampton, Virginia. Like, give your kid a popsicle, but they just happen to come in and ask, like, literally maybe right after you hung up that phone call. And you're like, I can't think about a popsicle. Like, why is he coming to ask me about a popsicle? Well, because he knows the rule is, if you want something, say the rule is, if you want a snack, you have to come ask. Well, he's doing what you asked him to do. Why are you yelling at him? You know?
So you're saying, based on the mental state of the adult, it's almost a transference, if you will, is what I'm hearing. That, so if I have this meeting, very important meeting, Stella and Savannah are asking me to sharpen a pencil, which they know how to sharpen, and contingent upon my conversation, the energy that I have, based on if my meeting is bad or good, I transfer that to my kid.
Yeah, well, you display it, you know what I mean? So when two people
So
argue, yeah, they're gonna, you know, so if you think about when two people are arguing, if one is calm but one gets angry, one is louder, and as that person gets louder, like the calm person eventually starts getting louder too, because one, they might have to just get louder to be heard. But, or if two people are angry, it's a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Well, what does that solve? You know, because that's coming from that irrational part of your brain that, you know, you're not listening. You don't even care what the other person is saying at that point. It's a ping pong back and forth. We will get into power struggles. They're called power struggles with our kids because we're right. You know, you're going to do what I say. You're 7 years old. I already told you no 15 times. I'm done. So by that moment, if you haven't walked away and you're still engaging that 7-year-old, well, you just shot yourself in the foot. Like, you should have walked away after the second no and meant it, you know? But, you know, kids will pick up on our emotions. We will pick up sometimes if our kid is distressed, you know, like a colic baby. Like, if you've had a colic baby, like, thank God I did not, but if you had a colic baby, you probably were like, oh my God, like, I need sleep. Like, oh my God, just go to sleep. Like, what, you know, I don't know what to do. Your system gets elevated. Well, that baby who is already distressed got even more distressed because they're actually literally feeling your anxiety through your chest. You know, they're feeling that hyperventilation. They're feeling your heart going bam, 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 bam. And then they're getting more like, they don't know what's going on because they're infants. And then, so it's like we feed on each other and we're fueling each other's whatever it is, good or bad, you know.
That's real good insight. That's insightful. So, wow. So you said,
that
think
was a lot
about
to
it.
answer that question,
make sure you
but...
Well, I mean, thank you for answering it. But you said, so initially, before we transition to that, you said, make sure you're aware of what you're thinking, you're aware of what you're feeling, and what you're doing.
Right. So aware of what you're thinking, aware, thinking or feeling, doesn't matter which comes first. So thinking, feeling, what are you doing, or what are you about to do, or what are you saying or about to say, and how will that negatively or positively impact the situation that you're either currently in or about to go into, or what was brought to you, you know? Like if you were thinking about having a conversation with your significant other about something that, you know, is a real concern, and then you come at home and you say, hey, hon, or if you're the guy, hey, babe, like, can we have a discussion? Or, you know, hey, can we sit down and talk after dinner tonight? And they're sitting on the couch, like fuming or crying. That's not, you know, and, or maybe if you want to talk like right then and there, like that's not really an appropriate time, you know, because it's one, well, in that situation, it's not going to go anywhere. But then if you see that person crying and then you become upset, or you were already upset, where's it going to go? This is going to be negative, you know?
Wow, that's good stuff.
Mhm.
So did you have any more tips on managing mental health in general? Not just, again, we're not limited to the pandemic because we're hoping this is going to be over, but just in life in general, how do you manage your mental health? I know a lot of people in life, not just as it relates to this pandemic, struggle with balance.
Right. So we will do and do and do and do and do. And like I said earlier, we don't leave time to recuperate. We don't leave time to sleep, you know? So if you work 12-hour shifts and you come home and then you take care of like after the kids, you know, or whatever, and then you're like, well, I really want to watch this TV show. Like all my friends have been talking about it. You know, I haven't watched it in a while. And then, but it's like 1 a.m. and you got to be up at 6. But you need that, like that downtime. It's a balance of, okay, like, do I say yes to every single piece of overtime that I'm offered if I'm going to be burnt out? No. Do you probably need the money in this situation or in any situation when you have kids? Yeah. But how can you even enjoy it, whatever you're going to say, or say you're saving up for vacation? If you're burning yourself
Mhm.
out by the time you get on vacation, you're just going to be like, I'm just tired. I just want to lounge around wherever you go. You know what I mean? Or if you're not eating healthy, if you're snacking on sugars all day long, you're going to have the sugar crash. If you are
Mhm.
drinking energy drinks, which they're very bad for you, if you drink energy drinks and energy drink and energy drinks, you can actually like go into a caffeine induced seizure. Like it happened to one of my friends' old boyfriends. Worked third shift, worked second shift, third shift was his normal shift, but would work second or would do all this other stuff or do a side business. Well, he literally came home one day and he went to, like, she was coming out of the door to go to work, and he literally went to open a door and like literally fell face first and had a caffeine induced seizure from energy drinks.
Wow.
Monsters, those 5-hour nasty shot things, whatever. He would drink a combination of them because he was constantly, you know, that stuff's bad for you. You know, if you're an anxious person, don't
Okay, so
drink too much caffeine. It'll make you more anxious.
well, that's good too. So, and I'm writing my tips down. So we've discussed reach out for help, learning that there are things you can control and things you can't control. If you're facing a difficult situation, you know, think about how you can change it on the front end. We've talked about anxiety. We've talked about coping skills, making time. You just kind of transition into dieting. What other, and I mean, of course, we know counseling and therapy, of course, naturally can help
Yeah.
with mental health. But what other things can people just do on their own to help manage? You know, you actually talked about wearing too many hats, you know. So what else? You talked about saying no. What else can we do to manage our mental health just in the home or in the community? You know, you mentioned exercise. With the social distancing in place, you know, we have restrictions on how close we can be to people or how many people can be in the same space. And I know that has to be a real downer for people who are social by nature. I'm sure all the extroverts are just really having a significant challenge during this space because you're not even allowed to be what's natural to you.
Well, and it's kind of weird because yes, some of the extroverts are impacted by it, but I've had some extroverts think like, wow, like I actually didn't realize that I actually like sometimes some downtime. The introverts actually, it's hit even harder because now they don't have a choice to be introverted. They have to be introverted. So I've actually,
Wow.
like some of my clients who are more introverted by nature, they were falling apart because I could choose to do this or I could choose to stay home, and I prefer that solitude because that's how I get my energy, my battery, like recharged. Extroverts will get their battery recharged by being social. So they found that like, hey, like it's actually kind of nice. I like working from home, but then like an introvert, they're forced to be at home now. That home is no longer safe either because now work is home. Home is work. and your kids are there or not. And if you live by yourself, that's even worse. So
Yeah,
with
that's
going
good
back to like,
perspective, Trish.
yeah, and with going with the exercise thing, like you don't have to go to a gym to do that. Just get out and walk in your neighborhood. Go just walk if you have a backyard. Like walk barefoot when it's warm and it's not, cold or anything. Walk barefoot in your backyard and just ground yourself. Grounding techniques. If you Google grounding techniques, there are some that they're very simple, so that can kind of bring you back into the moment of I'm focusing on something here and not something from my past, not something I'm worrying about, like with my kid or my mom or a doctor's appointment or COVID or anything like that. I'm just focusing on this moment where I'm at, literally physically in this present time. The best way to ground is through your feet. So whether that's in the sand, whether that's in the grass, like gardening, people like to do, you could, we have 13 miles of beaches where I live. It's open all year round. You can bike it, you can walk it, you can jog it. People go out there and they take their camera and they take pictures of the frozen water. They take pictures of the birds flying around. Find something beautiful, or find something, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Find something that is just beautiful and that you can enjoy for whatever reason why you enjoy it.
Okay, Trish. So before we wrap up, I want to touch on something that I don't feel is touched really heavily, if at all.
Mhm.
COVID has caused a whole lot of grief. I mean, we hear stats and we're looking at 500,000 people who have passed away from a pandemic.
Mhm.
And, on last month, we discussed here on the Hub, we discussed parenting in a pandemic and the challenges of parenting. We discussed, what it looks like for children and parents who did go outside the house to get therapy, counseling, etc. And we know that teledoc and counseling and all of those are now online, which is still an option, but contingent upon what the child is more receptive to, we don't know how that's going. But one thing that I have not heard a lot of dialogue about is
Mhm.
the grief that families are experiencing as a result of this pandemic. So you have people who go in the hospital and never come back out. So you have people who drop off their family members to go get a COVID test, or they're showing COVID symptoms, and the next they hear from these people, they're dead. They don't hear from them again at all, or they're saying their dying wishes, if you will, on FaceTime or on Skype. That is impactful.
Mhm.
That is so significant. And so that's a high level of grief that I don't feel is being addressed nationwide, community-wide. It's almost if it's getting lost in the numbers, if you will.
Right. And, and in the beginning, and even probably up until definitely through this summer, you could only have 10 people at a funeral, including the funeral people, like the priest or the pastor or whoever, you know what I mean? Like 10 people, So my friend, her dad passed away, and one of her siblings couldn't come and the grandkids couldn't come because they were 10 people, and you had to include, this was in like May. So it was like when everything was pretty much shut down everywhere. So 10 people. So her one sibling didn't even bother coming in from out of state because they wouldn't have been allowed to be there. So yes, people, with grief, it's a process. So when grief is expected, or when the death is expected, like a cancer patient who we'll go with cancer, maybe like diabetes or something like that, and that it's coming, or like dementia or Alzheimer's, you can kind of prepare ahead of time. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't sudden. When something is very sudden, it was unexpected, and you weren't planning for it, it's the same. It has that same reaction on the body as if you just saw, someone was just shot. You know what I mean? It hits the system like that. And with humans, we need the social connection. We need the touch. So we need to be able to hold that person's hand or give them a hug. And it's very hard because you're being told, no, you can't do what your family wanted for this person's funeral. You can't. And so people feel like, well, I'm not honoring my family. And so you can't have wakes, and you can't gather, you can't grieve in the way that people typically tend to grieve. And that's hard. Grief is a trauma, whether it was planned, well, not planned, but whether it was expected, whether it was sudden, whether it was a violent death. Like, there are stages that we need to go through, and we haven't been able to do that because we haven't been able to have the social piece, you know?
So as we get ready to wrap up the call, I want you, if you have any last tips or anything, but I would like you, because I know we have members in our audience who may be dealing with grief or who may view this later, who have lost family, friends, or someone special to them as a result of this pandemic. So if you would, Trish, as we wrap it up, just any tips that you have in general, you've given us some good stuff. I have my notes, just anything that you can give us in general. But in addition to that, speak to someone who's dealing with grief, who's trying to accept it or trying to, just come to grips with the loss of a loved one in this unprecedented time.
Well, I would say to reach out, if you go online, just like there's AA groups everywhere, there are grief support groups that you can actually go to and be involved with, whether in person now that things are like easing up some, or whether it's online because you yourself are afraid to be around other people. But to share that experience, that collective experience of someone just to validate you, to say, you know what, I understand how you feel. I felt the same way. It's hard not to be able to say goodbye. It's hard to see the person pass however they pass. It's that social connection that helps people move through the grief, to share the positive memories of that person, to share the anger and hurt that you feel, that you felt helpless. People feel helpless when people are dying. You feel helpless, right, that I should have, would have, could have done this, or you know what I mean? And it's hard not to do that. So I would try really hard to find support groups. Like here we have what's called the Highmark Caring Place. It's for kids, teens, and adults who lost people due to whatever, cancer, old age, whatever it is. Like they did it online. They had to adapt. It was shut down for a little bit until they could, because it's volunteer funded and stuff like that. I can't think, it's a nonprofit, but they had to get everything set up so that they could offer it online to people. You know what I mean? So reach out. That's the best thing you could do, is reach out to someone. They have the suicide hotline. Even if you're not suicidal, but if you're very sad and depressed, like, they will talk to you. They can help find services in your area. They will talk to you, and they're open 24/7. It's a national, across the country hotline. It's I think it's 1-800-273-TALK. And they will talk to you. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times your insurance company will have people sometimes who are there 24 hours a day to talk to you. Sometimes it's through your employee assistance program. Sometimes it's through the actual emergency number, if on your card for member services. So it's important to reach out and to let someone know that I'm not okay. And not being okay does not mean you're weak. It means I realize I've reached my limit to where I can cope and comprehend what's, I've exhausted all of my options. Now I need an outside view. I need someone with a 360-degree view around me instead of my view.
That's good. And I think that's what counseling equates to. Bringing somebody, I know when my therapy is just to have somebody to help me separate the colors in my head, to help me separate my thoughts from what is the reality. Because sometimes when you're going through something life-changing, or you need management as it relates to your mental health, you're biased. It's all about the way you see things. It's your purview, and you can't see nothing outside of how you feel. So I definitely think that therapy and counseling is interchangeable, if you will, with strength. We don't talk about it. It presents to have weakened society, and people feel like you don't know how to control your life, or you make poor decisions if you have to go seek somebody else from help. That could not be furthermore from the truth. Audience, please understand, there are people who are trained to help you separate the colors in your head, help you make sense of your life, give you tools, give you a toolkit for your tools to just keep you going and keep you aligned. I mean, life happens to us all. You're not in control of when it happens. So please definitely use the resources in your community, use the resources within your jobs. I know a lot of employers have the EAP program where you can call these counselors for a minimized fee, if a fee at all, just to get some help. And help is needed. Help is real. Again, you're asking for help does not mean you're weak. It does not mean you lack control. It means that you want control of your life. You want to make better choices. You want to make better decisions, and you want to feel better. So Trish, as we wrap this up, I thank you so much. As always, it's always a pleasure talking to you. You're so full of knowledge. I've always admired your demeanor, if you will, when it comes to talking about mental health is
Thank you.
pretty forthcoming, and you do not petticoat it. You don't make it pretty. You just deal with it for the sake of what it is. So I've always admired
Yes.
your strength when it comes to mental health. So if you just wanted to summarize everything we talked about before we wrap this up, please just take a few minutes right now and you have it.
So one thing before I do that is, Eap Counseling is free through your job, and they don't know that you're doing it unless, of course, you did something bad at work and they're forcing you. And then they only know like you're complying. And it's 3 to 6 to 9, depending on how much it's contracted for. But then sometimes you can stay with that person if you like them, or sometimes they have to refer you out. But also you can go to www.psychologytoday.com, put in your zip code or your city, and it will bring up every single therapist and psychologist in your town. And then you can filter based on like, do you want it for your kid? Do you want it for you? Do you want it for couples? Do you want it for depression? Do you want it for trauma? Do you want it for bipolar?
Wow.
And it'll filter down, and you can even filter it by what your insurance is, and it will give you a list, and you can see what the people look like. You can read we put a biography, we put a professional statement up there of like pretty much inviting you to come and look at that and stuff. So if you don't know where to start, that could be where to start. I've had, I'll say this, and I said it at the girl conference that I did with Shamira, the Hearst Change Your Narrative. If you focus on your past, you'll find depression. If you focus in the future, you'll find anxiety. If you focus on the present moment, that's where happiness can be found.
Can you say that again, Trish? That's powerful.
Yes.
Say it again.
If you focus too much in your past or on your past, that's where depression is. If you focus too much on the future, that's where anxiety lies. But the present moment is where you'll find happiness, and happiness is a choice. Even if it's, the silver lining of that moment or the silver lining of that day. When we're depressed and anxious, we will search out the negative because we've already set ourselves up to feel something bad is happening, and we will negate the happiness or the good things. We will negate the neutral, and everything is negative. So it's like rip those blinders off and say, like, I'm feeling really shitty right now. Sorry. I feel really crappy. I'm run down. I'm freaking out. I have flu-like symptoms. Like, what if I have COVID? But then if you kind of say like, wait, hold on a second. I live in a country where I can go get tested, and I'm going in 2 hours to get tested. You know what I mean? Like, I'm also home with my kids, and I'm getting the best cuddles right now. Or, my dogs or my cat, you find that little thing. And pets, if you have pets, when you're stressed, sad, whatever, pet your pet. There's a reason why they have pet therapy.
Got it. So basically, be present in the moment. If you want to be depressed, look at your past. If you want to have anxiety, that's in your future. But if you be present, you'll be calm, you'll be peaceful. So that is it for the Hub tonight. We thank Trish. I keep pausing when I get ready to say your name because your married name is a lot longer. We thank Trisha Herterfeld, licensed professional counselor. She has came on tonight and gave us some great tips as it relates to managing our mental health. For anybody who didn't catch it in the beginning, please go back and watch this over. There are resources listed. www, I believe she said psychology.today or .com in the comments.
Psychologytoday.com.
psychologytoday.com. And she also listed a 1-800 number. Trish, we thank you for your time. We thank you for your wisdom, and we thank you for your insight. Guys, don't forget to join us on Sunday. It's Easter Sunday. Yay, we're excited. Don't forget to join us at 11:15 a.m. right here at House of God Worship Center, HOGWC. Find us on Facebook Live. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope everybody have a good night. Thank you again, Trish.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome.